Yo, what's up everyone? Links here. Today we're going over how to retexture 3D assets to any color or camouflage pattern that you want. Now, this video is going to be replacing the old one on my channel, which is going to be made and listed soon. So if you want to bookmark it or save the link somewhere else, if you want to have access to it, then do it as quick as you can because I'm probably going to list it in about a week or two. Now in this tutorial I'm going to be using GIMP, which is a free open source image editing software. However, you can use whatever other software you're used to, like Photoshop, because the tools and the filters I'm going to be using here are also available there and the UI is also quite similar. Keep in mind this is not a tutorial on how to use GIMP, which means I'm not going to be explaining every single tool and filter I'm using here in detail, so I recommend you have some experience in the editing software you're going to be using. But if you don't have any experience, then don't worry, because you're going to be able to see the keys I'm pressing on the bottom of the screen, and you're also going to be seeing mouse clicks and whenever you use the scroll wheel to zoom in and stuff, so you can follow me through the process a bit easier. If you're looking specifically for a Photoshop tutorial, 3DMA made their own video covering the subject a few months ago. They also covered Substance Painter, which is a more professional 3D texturing program, but if you guys want me to make a video on that as well, then make sure to leave a comment down below. This video has timestamps in the description in case you want to skip to a specific part of the tutorial and you don't want to watch the whole thing. Maybe you're rewatching it for the second time. But anyway, let's get to it. So the asset we're going to be using in this tutorial is 3DMA's side plate pouches from Ferro Concepts. The reason I'm going to be using this is because it's a completely free asset that you guys can go over to the store and grab it yourself, so you can follow me through the texturing process. So usually when you buy a 3D asset, you're going to have the mesh folder and a textures folder. Now this one has the 3D models. We're not really going to mess with these now. We're just going to worry about this one, the textures folder. Now in here specifically, we have the ID map or the ID mask and the stitching mask. In this folder, we have the PBR textures. Now I'm not going to explain them in detail. You should probably do your research about that and how each one of them works. But the only ones we're going to worry about in this tutorial are the base color, specifically the coyote brown version of the texture, as well as the ambient occlusion and the normal maps. These two textures on the outside, the ID map and the stitching mask, are really useful so you can add more detail to your textures and make them look so much better. Okay, so let's start. Let's have the base color texture imported, right? So in this case, we have the coyote brown version of this texture imported. We're not going to be using a camouflage version of the texture. So let's say I want to have this retextured to gray. We're going to apply a hue saturation filter. Turn the saturation all the way down. There you go. You have a gray texture. If you turn it down a bit more, you have a black pouch. Now you should watch out with the lightness slider and not have it all the way to the left or just way too close to the edge right there, because you're going to lose some detail and it might look really bad in game. So I would recommend going for something more similar to dark gray if you want a black pouch. Now, of course, different engines and different games handle colors differently. In Arma 3, for example, this color right here might give me a pouch that looks like this in game. A bit more white, you know. So you have to get used to how your engine handles textures. Right now, I want to go for a Ranger green texture. So let me just eyeball it real quick. And maybe something like this looks pretty good. Now, there you go. That's a Ranger green pouch, right? And it looks decent in game. If you put it in game, it might look good. But personally, I want to go for something a bit different. Maybe I want a brighter elastic and a black Velcro. Now that's where the ID map comes in. The way they work is they have places with different shades and different colors, which are used for you to easily select different materials or different parts of a model. Here, for example, this pink color is used to separate the fabric from the armor plates right here at the bottom. The orange is used to split the Velcro from the main Cordura fabric, and the yellow is used for the elastic material. So in GIMP, I'm going to press Shift-O to get a color selection tool. I'm going to select the orange, go back to my base color layer, Ctrl-C, Ctrl-V, just make a copy. As you can see, I have a layer which is just the Velcro. We're going to do the same for the other colors. Now, just so it's a bit more organized, I'm going to change the layer names. So I'm going to change this to plates. There you go. So for the plates, I don't really want to change the color for it. I'm going to delete the filter. The elastic, maybe I want something a bit lighter, a bit more saturated as well. That looks pretty good. And for the Velcro, as I said before, I want a black Velcro. So I'm just going to remove saturation, reduce the lightness. Something like this looks pretty good. Now, personally, I think that stitching just looks way too dark, and I want to change the color. So this is where the stitching mask comes in. Now, the way I'm going to do this is by making a duplicate of this layer, dragging it all the way to the top. I'm going to right-click, add layer mask, and add. The stitching mask, we're going to Control X to cut it. Select the empty layer mask from the new layer we just made, Control V, and then press the anchor button. So now we can come here, we can press this edit filter right here, and we can do whatever color we want for the stitching. So I want something a bit more saturated, a bit lighter as well. Yeah, I think that looks pretty cool. And I'm just going to rename it just for, organization's sake. As you can see, we now have a lighter stitching. And that's basically how to use ID maps and a stitching mask. Now, some people might sell their products with ID maps that have the stitching included. And what we can do here is the exact same thing we did before for selecting the Velcro and the elastic webbing. And just have the color selection tool here by pressing Shift O in GIMP. Selecting that blue color right there. You might have to zoom in because, it's a bit too small. And then, just like how we did earlier, Control C and Control V from the base color texture. Okay, so now let's say you want to add a camouflage pattern to the retexture, right? So personally, I'm going to use Marpet Woodland because it's a camouflage pattern that I have saved on my computer. And I found this reference picture online, and I'm just going to use this as a reference for how the colors should look and also for the scale of the camouflage pattern itself. And I just imported the camouflage in my file here. So before we start putting the camouflage pattern onto the texture, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to this hue saturation filter that we had here earlier. We're going to reset it and turn the saturation all the way down. I'm going to press OK, get the camouflage pattern, and we're going to set the blending mode to overlay. As I said, the scale doesn't really match the reference we have, so I'm just going to scale this down a little bit. Be something like this. I think that looks pretty good. Okay, now we're going to rotate the pattern as well. Maybe move it around a little bit. Okay, I think that looks quite similar to how this pouch looks as far as the scale goes. And that's basically it. And then if you want to, you can change the color for the Velcro, for example. So maybe, actually the default color looks pretty good. So I'm just going to do that. Then for the elastic, maybe I'm going to turn the saturation, the lightness up a little bit. Something like this looks pretty nice. And then same with the stitching. Just going to brightness and the saturation up, maybe something a bit more orange, a bit more tan. It looks nice. Okay, and that's basically it, right? Now, here's the thing. Depending on what engine or what game you're retexturing this asset for, you might need to play with the colors on your camouflage as well. Either by having a hue saturation or a hue chroma filter, or maybe by adjusting the brightness and the contrast. So if you're doing textures for Arma 3, for example, you might need to turn the brightness and the contrast down a little bit, because the textures in game are going to be brighter than what you see in the base color texture. I'm going to keep it like this. And then one thing you might have noticed in the last part of the tutorial is that the ID map has a green and a red part, even though both are for this main fabric part of the texture itself. So here, I just opened the mod on Blender to show you guys, but as you can see, the green is used for these two parts of the mesh, and the red is used for this part here at the back. The reason this is most likely done is just to let whoever's retexturing know that these are facing the same direction in the 3D space, while the red part isn't. One thing that's also worth checking out is the orientation of faces in the UV map compared to the 3D space. What I mean by this is, let's select the right side of this part of the texture, or sorry, the model right here, and we see that has the same orientation as its UV island here. So I select the left side here, it's selecting the left side here. Now if we go over to this part of the mesh, and we select the right side, as you can see, it doesn't have the same orientation. It's at the top of the UV island. If you select the left side here in the model, that's the bottom of the UV island. So I imported the Marpad version of the texture that we made here in Blender. And as you can see, the orientation for the pattern is, the pixels are going vertically on this side and on this side, while here it's going horizontally. So let's say we want the pixels to go vertically like we've seen here and here. That means we're going to have to rotate the pattern for just this UV island. That means that we're going to have to go back to GIMP and select just the UV island for the portion that we want to change. As you can see here, this UV island is connected. So what we can do is we press F for the lasso tool, and while holding Control to remove from the selection, we can draw, we can split both of these faces like that. And then I'm just going to close this shape. There you go. What we're going to do now is make a new layer. We're going to sharpen the selection by going to Select and then Sharpen, just so we make sure the edges are not blurry. Using the bucket tool, we're going to paint this white. We're going to Control-I to invert selection and paint the rest black. We've basically made a mask for that UV island. What we can do now is use this mask so we can apply the camouflage to just that portion. So we can make a duplicate of our camouflage layer. Don't worry about the colors changing for now. You're going to press Shift-R to rotate the pattern. Right, now what we're going to do is we're going to add a mask to both of these layers. We're going to copy the mask we just made. And one thing you should do before you paste the mask in here is click your camouflage layer, go Layer, Layers to Image Size, and the same for the one below. And then you're going to Control-V that mask we just made and use the anchor again, like we did earlier with the stitching mask. And then we're going to come here, Colors, Invert. And we're basically just inverting the black and the white values here. So now if we export this texture and put it into Blender, so if you go back to Blender, we can now see that the camouflage pattern is all going the same direction. It's going vertically, even though the pattern is going horizontal here in the UV island. So let's say the asset you bought only comes in one camouflage pattern, and it doesn't come in some solid color like Coyote Brown, Ranger Green, Gray, or whatever other color. What we're going to do is we're going to apply the same principle that we used in the previous tutorial for, the Marpad Woodland retexture, and we're going to overlay a camouflage over a gray layer. But before that, we have to understand how we're going to use a normal map and the ambient occlusion PBR textures for this part of the video. So we're going to use the normal maps and the ambient occlusion. So there are two types of normal maps. There are OpenGL normal maps and DirectX normal maps. They're usually named accordingly in their texture folder. However, the only difference is that the green channel on the DirectX normal maps are inverted. So for retexturing purposes, we're going to be using the OpenGL texture. Now, in case you don't have it and you only have the DirectX texture, you just have to go here to the Channels tab, only have green selected, and invert colors. And now you have an OpenGL normal map. And then here's the ambient occlusion. This is usually default across games, so you don't have to change it. We're going to use these two textures just to overlay on our retexture so we can add detail back. The reason we're doing this is because we can't easily remove the camouflage pattern from the texture. Thankfully, the elastic webbing and the Velcro here doesn't have any camouflage pattern applied to it, so it's going to be even easier. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a layer which is filled with a gray color. This is what we call a mid-gray, which is basically with the value setting applied to 50, which is right in the middle. Just type 50, use the paint bucket tool, and fill it. And then we're going to have our normal map here. We're going to desaturate it. After we desaturate it, we're going to drag it down here right over the gray layer. And we're going to change the blending mode to multiply. The image occlusion, we're also going to change it to multiply. As you can see, we're just adding the shadows back, as well as those folds, stitching, and the fabric look to the texture. We're then going to grab our camouflage swatch and have the blending mode set to overlay, similar to how we did on the last part of this video. Now we're going to do the same thing we did when we first started the tutorial, which is separate the plates, the elastic, the Velcro, and the stitching by using the ID map. And there you go. As you can see, the results aren't the same as following the other method we followed before, but you can play with your ambient occlusion color as well as your normal map's color, as well as their opacity. Now, if we go back to the last Marpet retexture that we did, because, this one looks a bit better, we can also add some wear to our texture so it looks a bit dirty. The way you can do this is by adding a layer, changing the blending mode to pass-through, and then using different layers with different blending modes and different colors, and using masks to add the wear look to it. In this case here, I just use a solid noise generator that comes with GIMP to add these clouds and simulate dirt. Here, I use a simplex noise, which just adds some small spots as well to the textures. And here, I have a custom grunge mask that I got off the internet. I can't exactly share this one, but you can find plenty of free packs in the internet. As you can see, this makes the fabric look a bit more dirty and has a worn look to it. You can play around with the blending modes, colors, as well as the opacity to get your desired look. But this just adds some more details to your texture and makes it look better overall. Now let's export this and see how it looks in Blender. There you have it. As you can see, we have our Marpet retexture on the right side and the original Coyote Brown texture on the left side. You can also see the worn look I just mentioned. And there you have it. These are the best ways for you to retexture an asset in GIMP or any photo editing software. I recommend you use Substance Painter, as I mentioned earlier in the video, which is a more professional software. So if you guys want to see that, then please let me know in the comments down below. I also recommend you guys join the Discord Camo thread, which is a community of people that share different camouflage swatches. If you want ATEX, for example, you can just type it over here in the top right search feature. And this guy even put a bunch of different variations here that you can use for your textures. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions, make sure to drop them down below in the comments. I'll make sure to answer them whenever I'm free. Anyway, see you guys in the next video.